She found the envelope on a Thursday. It was lying on the floor of a room she was never supposed to enter, half hidden beneath a rolled blueprint. Her name written on the front in handwriting she had never seen. Not her full name. Just Precious. One word. Written with the kind of deliberate care that meant whoever held that pen had thought carefully before pressing it to paper. She picked it up, turned it over. The seal was intact. And then she heard the stair creak behind her. And when she turned, Ryu Seongmin was standing in the doorway. And for the first time in the 3 months she had lived inside his house, he looked afraid. But that was Thursday. This story begins in November. And November was a long time ago. Precious Barnabas was not a woman who fell apart in public. That was the first thing anyone who knew her understood. She processed pain privately, recalibrated quickly, and showed up. Always showed up. It was the quality that had carried her through a childhood of watching her mother start over twice, through years of building a career in a city that did not make room for her easily, and through the specific kind of ambition that asks everything of a person before it gives anything back. She had been 27 when she first rented the East London studio space, a converted ground floor unit with large north-facing windows and concrete floors she had planned to warm with rugs and samples and the particular organized chaos of a working design practice. She had spent 2 years saving for it. 2 years building the client pipeline alongside her business partner, Deli, who had been her closest friend since university and who had, on a Wednesday morning in October, transferred the entire startup fund, every pound of it, and disappeared. She stood inside the empty studio the day the lease was meant to be signed, holding 2 small silver keys that no longer meant anything, and she was completely still for 4 seconds. Then she crossed to the estate agent waiting by the door, placed the keys in his palm, and said she needed to reschedule. She walked out onto the street and stopped on the pavement. The city moved around her, buses, voices, someone laughing too loudly from a coffee shop across the road. Precious stood inside all of it and did not cry and did not scream and did not call anyone, because there was no version of this story she was willing to tell out loud yet. The eviction notice came 11 days later. The business account had been linked to her personal rent guarantee. Her landlord was not unkind, but he was a businessman, and businesses did not run on sympathy. She had 3 weeks. The man she had been seeing for 8 months, a quiet, careful architect named James who had told her twice that he admired how self-sufficient she was, stopped responding to her messages the same week. No confrontation. No conversation. Just absence, which was somehow more humiliating than cruelty would have been. 3 losses. 1 season. She was 29 years old, sleeping on a friend's sofa, and the version of her life she had been building so carefully had been reduced to a single carry-on bag and a sketchbook she couldn't stop filling. She found the listing at 2:47 in the morning, 2 weeks into the sofa and 3 weeks into telling herself she was fine. Private household position. Seoul, South Korea. Live-in role, immediate start, competitive salary, accommodation included, minimal Seoul connections required. The listing was spare, almost no detail, but attached to it was a standard application form that asked for her professional background. She filled it out with her interior design credentials because they were the truest thing she had. She sent it before she could reason herself out of it. They responded within 6 hours. She told herself it was practical. A reset. Somewhere no one knew her name or her failure. She was not running. She was buying time. That was what she told herself on the flight to Incheon, watching the map on the seat screen track her progress east, moving her incrementally away from every version of herself she had not managed to become. She landed on a gray November morning. The private car that met her drove through Seoul, and then out of it, up into the hills where the roads narrowed and the trees grew close on either side. Then the estate appeared through the tree line. All glass panels, dark stone, clean architectural lines against a white sky. It was extraordinary. It was also, in a way she couldn't immediately name, like looking at a photograph of a place rather than the place itself. Precise without warmth. beautiful without life. A household manager named Mrs. O met her at the entrance. Inside, the estate ran floor to ceiling in dark materials and expensive silence. Every surface was in its place. Every angle was intentional. It looked like a showroom. It felt like a held breath. Then Ryu Seongmin walked in. He appeared from the far corridor, tall, composed, moving through his own home with the unhurried certainty of a man who had never needed to perform himself for anyone. He looked at Precious for exactly 2 seconds. Not dismissively, efficiently. "The operational guidelines are in the folder on the kitchen counter," he said. "Mrs. O will show you your quarters." He walked back to his office and closed the door. Precious looked at Mrs. O. Mrs. O looked at her shoes. The folder was 40 pages long. She read every page that night, sitting on the edge of her bed in the East Wing quarters, which were clean and quiet and well-furnished and felt nothing like hers yet. The folder covered schedules, supply vendors, temperature preferences, maintenance contacts, and a single line near the end of page 37 that read, "Third floor, not within scope of household responsibilities. Please do not access." She turned the page. She noted it. She went asleep. If you've ever arrived somewhere new carrying everything you had left and told yourself it was just temporary, just a bridge, just time, then you already understand exactly what Precious was feeling that first night. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. Hit that subscribe button, because this story is only just beginning. The first 60 days ran on routine. Precious moved through the estate with quiet competence, supplies ordered, surfaces maintained, the rhythms of a large private household absorbed and managed without friction. She was good at this in the way she was good at most things she turned her attention to. She understood spaces, and this was, at its core, a problem of space. Seongmin was rarely visible. He kept long hours in his office, took meals at irregular times, and passed through shared rooms with the particular vacancy of a man who had learned to live entirely inside his own head. He was not rude. He was absent, and absence, Precious had learned, was its own kind of communication. She told herself this was ideal. No entanglement, no complexity, just the work and the salary and the slow, quiet rebuilding of something she had not yet allowed herself to name. She was 3 weeks in when she noticed the frames. They were everywhere. The living room, the main corridor, the library wall, dark lacquered wood, museum-quality glass, hung with the kind of deliberate care that meant someone had once thought carefully about every single one. And every one of them was empty. Not bare, empty. The difference mattered. These had not been hung in anticipation. They had been cleared. She opened the one nearest the window out of professional habit, checking the glass for dust, and saw it on the backing board. A faint rectangular discoloration. The ghost of a photograph that had been pressed against the paper for years before someone removed it. She closed the frame exactly as she found it and walked out of the room without looking back. That evening she called the London housekeeper agency to follow up on a missing residency document for her visa. The woman on the phone checked once, then again, then a third time. They had no record of Precious Barnabas. No profile, no referral, no correspondence with any estate in Seoul. Precious sat at the kitchen table for a long time after hanging up, her coffee growing cold beside her. She replayed the application, the listing found at nearly 3 in the morning, the response within 6 hours, the minimal reference check, the offer made within 48 hours. She had been grateful for the efficiency. She had not questioned it. She thought about packing that night. She had her bags half assembled in her mind before she'd even stood up from the table. But something stopped her, not comfort, not fear. Something quieter, like a sentence with a word still missing. She stayed. It was the sketchbook that broke the first silence between them. She had been drawing compulsively in her downtime. It was how her mind had always worked, solving spaces the way other people solve puzzles, the instinct too deep to suppress, even when she was supposed to be someone's housekeeper rather than someone's designer. One morning, she left the sketchbook on the kitchen counter by accident when Seongmin came through earlier than usual. She returned 20 minutes later. He was gone. The sketchbook had not been put away. It had been moved to the center of the table. Open to the page she had left it on. A full redesign of the estate's east corridor, warmer materials, repositioned light fixtures, a window she had suggested cutting into a wall that currently had none. She picked it up and said nothing. Neither did he. The next morning there was a second chair at the kitchen table. There had only ever been one. She noticed it and decided, very deliberately, not to decide what it meant. The power cut happened on a Tuesday in December. A winter storm moved in from the north, and the backup generator failed somewhere around 7 in the evening, taking the heat in the upper rooms with it. Precious came downstairs with a blanket over her shoulders to find Seong-min already standing in the kitchen, holding a box of matches and looking at the candle shelf with the expression of a man encountering a problem his money had never prepared him for. She crossed to him, took the matches without comment, and had 4 candles lit in 30 seconds. He watched her do it. They ate reheated food from opposite ends of the long kitchen counter. The conversation started practically: generator location, backup circuits, whether the pipes on the north side needed monitoring in this temperature. Technical. Safe. Then it ran out of technical ground and went somewhere else entirely, the way conversations do when there's nowhere left to retreat to. Why Seoul? He asked. It was the first personal question he had directed at her in 60 days. She gave him the edited version: a professional setback, a need for a reset, a desire for somewhere unfamiliar. He listened with a quality of attention she had not experienced in a long time. Not performing interest. Actually present. She asked, without planning to, why are the frames empty? He was quiet long enough that she regretted it. Then, because some things hurt more as a reminder than as a loss. Neither of them moved closer. Neither looked directly at the other. But something in the room changed, invisible and irreversible, the way temperature changes before anyone can feel it. She was in bed by 10. She lay awake until past midnight. 3 days after the storm, he appeared in the kitchen doorway while she was having breakfast. Bring me the sketchbook. He sat at the table and went through every page without speaking. Precious stood near the window with her arms crossed, pretending the rhythm of his page-turning did not affect her breathing. He was thorough. He looked at each redesign the way he would look at a professional portfolio. Not casually, not to be polite. With actual consideration. He stopped at one page longer than the others. It was a redesign of the third-floor corridor. She had sketched it from memory, working only from what she could observe from the staircase, solving the space the way she always did, from the outside in. How did you know what was up there? I didn't. I solved it from what I could see. He looked at her for a moment. Why did you stop doing this professionally? I didn't stop. I got robbed. The distinction landed differently than she intended. She watched something move across his face. Behind the composure, something that recognized the gap between quitting and being taken from. He closed the sketchbook and slid it back toward her across the counter. You should keep designing. This house needs it. It was the first time, in all the weeks she had been there, that he had acknowledged his own house as something incomplete. She picked up the sketchbook. She did not say thank you. She did not trust her voice with more than silence right then. If you felt that, if you've ever had someone see your work and make you feel like a whole person again, then you know exactly where Precious was standing in that moment. Drop a comment below. This story has a long way left to go. January arrived and the routines renegotiated themselves without either of them arranging it. Their mornings began to overlap. Not by plan, by the subtle gravitational drift of two people who had stopped working so hard to miss each other. Precious would find him already in the kitchen when she came down, reading documents at the far end of the counter, and she would make tea without asking and set a second cup within his reach without comment, and neither of them remarked on the fact that this had become normal. He came into the library one evening while she was cataloging books and sat in the chair nearest to where she was working. He didn't speak. He opened his own book and read. She kept cataloging. They were in the same room for 40 minutes, and it was the most comfortable either of them had been in longer than they could honestly account for. When she said good night and reached the doorway, she paused, just a half second, her back to him. She didn't know why. She heard him look up from his book. She didn't turn around. She left. She sat on the edge of her bed that night and had a direct, honest conversation with herself. She was not a woman who drifted into things. She was not a woman who let warmth accumulate until it became something she hadn't consented to. She knew what proximity did. She knew what candlelight and shared kitchens and a man who listened like the room owed him silence could build without anyone laying a single brick intentionally. She also knew that the ground beneath this entire situation had not been checked. And precious Barnabas did not build on ground she hadn't checked. She made herself a list. The agency had no record of her. The reference check had been superficial to the point of negligence. The offer had come too fast. The requirements had been too specific. Her background in interiors and design, her lack of soul connections, her immediate availability. It was not the profile of someone filling a household position. It was the profile of someone being selected. She fell asleep without resolving the list. It was still there in the morning, waiting. February brought the almost. He had been showing her parts of the estate she hadn't accessed before, not because the 40-page folder had been revised, but because he had quietly, informally, stopped enforcing it. He took her through the East Garden one afternoon to show her a structural issue with the boundary wall that he was considering having redesigned. She looked at the wall for a long moment and said, without thinking, "You need to take the whole section down. The foundation is compensating for something underneath it. If you just repair the surface, you'll be back here in 2 years." He looked at her. "What? The ground shifts here in winter. You can see it in the way the base has settled unevenly. The wall is already solving for a problem nobody addressed when it was first built." She paused. "You'd know that if you'd looked at it structurally instead of aesthetically." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's exactly what my site engineer told me for years ago. I had him redo the surface anyway." "How did that go?" "I'm standing in front of the same problem 4 years later." She almost smiled. "You should have listened to your engineer." "I'm listening to you." She looked at the wall instead of at him. They stood in the cold garden for another few minutes, the bare trees on the hillside perfectly still, and then she said she had supply orders to confirm and went inside. That evening she sat in her room and pressed her palms flat against the cool surface of her desk and breathed. She was not a person who made careless decisions. She was not a person who allowed feeling to outrun information. There were things she did not know about this house and this man, and how she had come to be standing in his garden telling him his wall was compensating for something underneath it, and until she knew them, nothing else was safe to name. She was right. She just didn't know how right she was. It was a Thursday in late February when she passed the third-floor staircase and stopped. The door at the top was open. Not wide, just ajar, a thin seam of gray light falling across the top stair. She stood at the bottom and looked at it for a moment. In 60 days of passing that staircase, the door had been sealed. No handle on her side. A solid, deliberate closure. Now it was open, which meant it had been opened from within. Which meant Xiaomin had been up there recently and left it by accident, or not by accident at all. She went up. The room was large and cold and lit only by ambient light from a single north-facing window. The central table was covered with an architectural scale model. Incomplete, extraordinarily detailed, clearly months of careful work, clearly abandoned mid-construction. It was a building she didn't recognize. Something between a cultural center and a private residence. Elegant, unfinished. Around it, rolled blueprints, site photographs, handwritten calculations on loose paper in a hand she recognized from the margins of maintenance notes she had countersigned. She moved slowly around the table. There was something in the quality of the model that felt different from professional work. Too much care. Too much specificity. The kind of architectural detail that meant someone had been building this for themselves, not for a client. She was nearly all the way around the table when she saw the envelope. It was on the floor near the far wall, half tucked beneath a rolled blueprint as though it had slid from somewhere or been placed there deliberately, within reach but out of sight. Cream paper, aged at the corners. One word on the front in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. Precious. Not Precious Barnabas. Not Miss Barnabas. Just Precious. She stood very still. Then she picked it up and turned it over in her hands. The seal was intact, never opened. Her name written on an envelope in a room she was never supposed to enter, in a house she had been placed in by an agency that had no record of her. She broke the seal. She heard the stair creak behind her before she could read a single word. She turned. Seongmin was standing in the doorway in the gray light, and he was not looking at the envelope in her hands. He was looking at her face, and the expression she saw on him. Composed, controlled Seongmin, who had barely shifted expression in 3 months, was something she had not seen before and did not immediately have a word for. Then she found it. Afraid. If you have ever stood in a room and realized that the life you thought you were living had a different architecture entirely, leave a like on this video right now, because what Precious is about to find out changes everything. He asked her to come downstairs. She followed him to the kitchen, their kitchen, in the way it had become without either of them naming it, and they sat at opposite ends of the counter. The same counter where they had talked by candlelight in December. The same counter where he had looked through her sketchbook and told her this house needed her work. She set the envelope between them and kept her hands in her lap and waited. He spoke first. For months ago, he said, Han Jisoo had contacted him. Not to return. Not to apologize. She had called him and told him only that she had arranged something she believed he needed, and that he would understand it when the time came. He had asked what she meant. She had said, "You'll know when you stop being afraid to." He had not investigated. He told Precious this without softness, without self-defense, with the particular flatness of someone recounting a choice they had already judged themselves for. He had suspected. He had chosen not to look because some part of him understood that knowing for certain would require him to admit how much he needed what was happening. And Ryu Seongmin had spent 2 years building a life in which he did not need anything he could not control. Precious picked up the envelope. She unfolded the letter inside. It was 3 paragraphs long, written in the same careful hand. She read it once quickly and then once slowly, and the second reading cost her more than the first. Jisoo wrote that she did not know Precious's name when she wrote it. She knew her portfolio. She had found it through a mutual contact in London's design industry, read about the collapsed business in a trade publication, and recognized something in the work, warmth inside precision, which was the thing she had never been able to give Seongmin and had spent 2 years pretending wasn't important. She had arranged the agency listing. She had constructed the referral. She had chosen Precious specifically, not randomly. With the same deliberate care she had used to write a name on an envelope she left in a room she knew Precious would eventually find. She wrote that she did not do it from guilt. She had left Seongmin for reasons that were true and right for both of them, and guilt was too simple and too self-serving a reason for any of this. She had done it because she left and then watched, from a careful distance, as he turned a beautiful house into a monument to absence. Because she had spent 2 years carrying the knowledge that the man she had walked away from was disappearing inside walls he had built to be impressive and furnished with nothing. The last line read, "He will let you leave when it comes to it. He will not stop you. Go far enough that he has to decide. He will come." Precious set the letter on the counter. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Seongmin. She did not raise her voice. This was important, not for him, but for herself. She had not come this far to perform her pain for anyone. "I came to Seoul," she said, "because I had nothing left in London and I needed to prove that I could stand on my own ground. That was the only thing I had left, the belief that whatever I built next, I built it myself." He was looking at her with complete attention. He did not flinch. "Someone used my grief as a selection criteria. My lowest point was someone else's casting decision. I was the answer to a question nobody asked me." "Yes," he said. "And you knew something was wrong. Not everything, but enough." "Yes." And you chose not to look. I chose not to look, he said, because I hadn't wanted to be in any room with any person for 2 years. And then I did. I wanted to be in the same room as you. I chose not to investigate because I didn't want to lose it before it became something worth losing. That's not good enough. I know. The silence between them was not angry. It was the silence of two people trying to locate themselves inside a truth they didn't build and couldn't dismantle. Precious pressed her palms flat on the counter, the same gesture she made at her desk when she needed to feel solid ground, and breathed. I'm not angry at Jisoo, she said finally. I understand Jisoo. I understand her more than I want to. She paused. I'm angry at having been arranged, at being moved into position without my knowledge. I have spent my entire life being someone who builds things from nothing, from scratch, on her own terms. That is not vanity. That is the only thing I know how to trust. She stood up. She picked up the letter. She folded it once and set it back on the counter between them. I need you to not follow me upstairs. He nodded. She left the kitchen without looking back. She packed before dawn, not frantically, with the same quiet efficiency she had arrived with, which was somehow more final than rage would have been. She moved through the estate one last time in the dark, past the library, past the east corridor she had redesigned in her sleep, into the kitchen doorway. She stopped there for a moment, looking at the counter where the candles had burned down to nothing in December, where two people had accidentally recognized each other in the dark. She memorized it. Then she picked up her bags and walked to the car waiting at the entrance. She did not look up at the window. If she had, she would have seen him standing there, the same position he was in the day she arrived, the same floor-to-ceiling glass, watching the car move down through the bare trees until the headlights were completely gone. She did not see the frame near the living room window either, the one she had opened months ago to check the glass for dust, finding only the ghost of a photograph. If she had looked on her way out, she would have seen that it was no longer empty. Inside it, precisely placed behind the museum glass, was a single page from her sketchbook, the East Corridor redesign, the first one he had ever seen, framed and mounted while she was sleeping, positioned where a photograph used to be. She left without seeing it. He let her leave without saying so. 3 months later, Precious Barnabas opened a studio in East London. It was small and warm and precisely designed. Her sketches on the walls, her materials on the shelves, her handwriting on the planning board, her coffee going cold on the desk because she had been working since before the city woke. A brushed brass placard beside the front door read, Barnabas Studio, Interior Design. She had installed it herself on a Saturday morning in May while her phone played music too loud for the hour and her neighbor knocked on the wall, and she didn't turn it down. She was on a call with a client, composed, warm, entirely in her element, when there was a knock at the studio door. She finished the call, set the phone down, crossed the room. She opened the door. Seongmin was standing on the pavement outside her studio in a gray coat. No assistant. No car visible. No prepared presentation. Just him, in her city, on her street, outside her door. He was holding nothing. He looked like a man who had made a decision and driven it all the way to its conclusion without stopping to rehearse it. She looked at him for a long moment without speaking. I'm not here to explain, he said. I'm not here to defend Jisoo or apologize for what I chose not to see. I'm here because I chose to be. Nobody arranged this. Nobody sent me. There's no envelope, no listing, no agency. There's just me, standing outside a door you might not open, because you are the only person I have been fully honest with in 2 years. And I don't know how to go back to a life where I'm not. The street was quiet behind him. A bus moved past at the end of the road. Somewhere above them a window opened. Precious was quiet for a long time. Then, you should have come sooner. She stepped back from the doorway. Not a surrender. An invitation, on her ground, in her space, in her city. He stepped inside. The studio door stayed open behind him. Morning light came in from the street. Her name was on the placard outside. Her work was on every wall. Two people standing in a room that belonged entirely to her, and choosing, for the first time in this story, freely and without arrangement. She would tell him about the framed sketch eventually. He would tell her he knew she hadn't seen it. They would stand in a kitchen, her kitchen, a different one, and talk until the coffee went cold, and neither of them would mind. But that was later. This was now. And now was enough. She had spent 2 years trying to survive. He had spent 2 years trying to forget. In the end, neither plan worked. And that, finally, was the best thing that had ever happened to either of them. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever rebuilt from nothing or waited for someone to choose you the right way, drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit hardest. And if you're new here, subscribe now because this is what we do on this channel. Every single time. See you in the next one.